What sorcery is this? With the birth of new Vitaphone technology. Excuse me. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, prepare to be dazzled, entranced, mystified by my film, The Disappearing. My name is Ian Ray, a communications senior, obviously, as I'm standing here before you with my captive audience. And I am here to talk to you, ironically, about silent film, specifically how nonverbal communication manifests itself in silent cinema. Now, why am I an expert on this topic? Well, apart from spending Easter weekend sleeping on the floor of the Xavierite office in order to make my deadline, now there was another man who spent Easter weekend lying inert on a dark enclosed space on Easter weekend, but I'm not here to make that comparison. I'm here to talk to you about silent film. Now, I have pored over the research. I've examined specific nonverbal communication cues, the technology of the time period, the tools, tricks, and techniques that filmmakers of the time period used, and more importantly, how they use nonverbal communication techniques and film techniques to literally work hand in hand, to tell a story. I've watched numerous films from The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to Nosferatu, and I even endured the horribly, horribly racist mess of Birth of a Nation for you people. So believe me when I say, I'm an expert on silent film. Now, just like when I was editing, before we can put all of our sequences together, we have to individually watch each clip to see what it's about. So the first clip we're going to watch is going to be nonverbal communication cues, and then our next clip will be the technology of the time period of the 1920s, of the silent era, specifically ranging from 1894 to 1929, with the birth of new Vitaphone sound technology recording. And then finally, we'll combine the clips and explore and examine how these two phenomena were able to combine in order to tell a story. Now, nonverbal communication is the most fundamentally ancient form of communication. It predates human speech by several millennia. And out in the audience now, I just see a cornucopia of communicative phenomena happening on all of your faces. I can read it plain as day. Now, Dr. Mello, you are studying intently my speech. Dr. Robinson, you're looking stern, but I can tell by that squint in your eye that you're secretly rooting for me. And Dr. Sternberg, you're fondly reminiscing your days watching silent films as a child in the 1900s. Forgive me. Nonverbal communication is a language understood by all, written nowhere, and spoken by no one. Now, affect displays are the looks on all of our faces. There are 6 universal human emotions, as discovered by Dr. Paul Ekman, who, studying interpersonal deception theory, because I looked at this through an interdisciplinary criminology lens, discovered that there were 6 universally recognized human emotions, and they are surprise, disgust, anger, fear, happiness, and sadness. We're all able to ascertain these emotions fundamentally nonverbally. Now, the next bit of communication that I'm going to talk about is proxemics, specifically the study of distance. Now, in silent film, this manifests itself not only in the distance between characters blocking the scene, examining their territoriality and how their relationship examines and extrapolates that, but also the framing of the shot itself. For instance, the language of the different shots we use tells a great deal. A long shot can be used to establish a scene, but also convey emotional distance, convey grandeur. Likewise, a high-angle shot can display power. This person has power over me, but it can also sort of ironically make a person appear weak. And a close-up really focuses in so we can see all of these fantastic affect displays. Silent film stars, the likes of Charlie Chaplin, who I dressed up as in homage, did not have the benefit of synchronized sound in film. They had to rely on larger-than-life, over-the-top communication techniques to tell their story. Simultaneous proxemics, and also finally semiotics, or symbols, the study of visual images and how they're striking, and also physically the intertitles between scenes, which my PowerPoint slides are modeled after. As films increased in length, they needed these little slates in between scenes to establish and explain what was going on the screen, which you're all no doubt familiar with. Now, I'm going to, if AJ, my friend, if you could dim the lights, we are going to examine how, in my film, nonverbal communication techniques manifest themselves in order to tell our story. Look at this broad acting style. Look at the showmanship Look at how this proxemic shot shows his emotional disdain as he walks away from his memories. Look at how the shadows and the dead tree, the semiotics of the scene, the symbology, reflect the tone of the scene. Notice how the shadows coalesce over his face. Note the pace of his walk, the resignation in his face, the emotional distance he feels from his life and from everyone in it. How this low-angle shot, which usually makes people appear powerful, makes him appear devastated and weak. How this close-up makes him feel as he ponders, ending it all and contemplating a final disappearing act. Just look at those affect displays. We see fear, we see regret, we see resignation, we see underneath it all a determination to live and a confusion as to whether or not he wants to. The semiotics of a wedding ring underneath dead trees. These films, which I have, which I have worked painstakingly to replicate the style of, really utilized every trick and tool in their wheelhouse in order to tell a story. And they did that since, technically, 1888 is the earliest film ever recorded. It's called Round Hay Garden Scene, but technically, it's really 2 minutes of two lovers walking in a garden. Barely qualifies as a scene. Now, Thomas Edison invented the kinetoscope in 1893. I say invented because I'm very firmly anti-Thomas Edison, but this is not a speech about that. This is about throwing credit where credit is due. Thomas Edison's assistant, W.L.K. Dixon, invented the kinetoscope, which is sort of a glorified zoetrope. I believe you all remember from the time we were children, a zoetrope is almost like a modern-day GIF that you see on Tumblr, on BuzzFeed. Basically, it's a rotating cylinder. See, you peer into it, and inside is a different strip of animation. You see a penguin waddling over and over again in a loop, and it creates the illusion of motion because these frames, just subtly different from each other, progressing, are moving in very quick succession. That's all film technically is 18 frames at this time period, 18 frames per second now, 24 frames per second, played in such quick succession that it creates the illusion of movement. That's all film is, and it's an illusion, which I will get to later in my next point. But now I'm talking about the technology of the time period itself. Now, Edison just had sort of a glorified parlor trick. Now, the Lumiere brothers in France were the real progenitors of film. They invented the cinématographique, which was the first combination to combine camera, projector, and printer. And together, they created the first movie houses. They physically got people in to marvel at the spectacle. But the problem was, they hadn't realized the full implication of the technology they had at their hands. All they were using it to shoot were workers leaving a factory. They were using it to watch trains arriving at a station. This was the first moving mass media. This changed the game completely. While it was a one-way channel between message sender and receiver, people were no longer bound by time. They had the illusion of moments recorded and preserved on film forever. The newspaper changed the game because